What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. We continue with our schedule preview projected record series. The Missouri Tigers are up next. Before we get to 2023, let's look back at 2022. Here was the schedule from 2022 for Missouri. They were 6-7, 6-6 in the regular season. Wins over Louisiana Tech, Abilene Christian, Vanderbilt, South Carolina, New Mexico State, and Arkansas. And then losses to Kansas State, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Looking at those 6 games, really not a surprise that Missouri lost those 6 games. You look at the wins, though. The win over South Carolina, the win over Arkansas, those were big-time wins. And really, well, they should have beaten Auburn. I said not a surprise that they lost. You know, you see the schedule at Auburn and think that could be a tough game, but they really should have won that game. But again, South Carolina, Arkansas, those were the big wins for them last year. Had to play Kansas State in the non-conference. Really didn't have anything else tough outside of that. But, you know, they got blown out by Kansas State. Turned out that Kansas State was really good last year, but still, that was a tough loss. They'll play them again this year. In fact, let's look at the games outside of the division. They will play South Dakota, Middle Tennessee, Kansas State, and they'll play Memphis and St. Louis. So Memphis, a pretty good group of 5 team. That's a nice game on the schedule. And then again, playing Kansas State this year, this time at home. That's going to be a tough one. I think Kansas State will be favored in that game, even at Missouri. They finished with a great season last year, winning the Big 12, and they'll have some key pieces back. So that'll be a tough game right there. And then in the cross-division games, the games against the West, they'll play LSU, and then they'll go on the road to face Arkansas. They got them at home last year. That seems to always be a great game. Missouri, Arkansas, you know, it was kind of a manufactured rivalry. The SEC just put it together, but we've gotten some great games out of that matchup. And then, you know, LSU, that's a tough draw. You don't want to play LSU or Alabama this year. Maybe not even Texas A&M, but LSU definitely, you don't want to have to play them. So that makes for a pretty tough schedule with Kansas State in the non-conference. Memphis also could be a little bit tricky. And then LSU and Arkansas out of the West. Pretty tough draw there. So you go week by week. They'll open up with South Dakota on September 2nd. Then Middle Tennessee the next week, I should say, on September 9th. So 2 pretty easy games there before playing Kansas State on September 16th. Memphis is going to be looking for some revenge at home. But that will be a tough matchup there. That's going to be a tough one for sure. Then Memphis after that on September 23rd. I don't think that's a guaranteed win. Memphis, again, is a pretty solid group of 5 program, so we'll see how that one plays out. But I think Missouri will definitely be favored. So they play all 4 of their non-conference games right out of the gate, get them over in the month of September. And then next game to close out the month of September is the first SEC game. It'll be a road game at Vanderbilt. Definitely a winnable game there for Missouri, but could be a little tricky on the road. We'll see. LSU on October the 7th. That'll be a home game. Then they'll play at Kentucky on the 14th, back home for South Carolina on the 22nd. And then they'll play Georgia on November 4th on the road. Remember, they gave Georgia a scare last season. But I don't know, Georgia might be fired up for that one in Athens. Tennessee next on November 11th, Florida on the 18th, and then they'll close things out with Arkansas on the 24th. I'm assuming the schedule actually says the 25th, which is the Saturday after Thanksgiving, but of course they always play on Friday, so unless something happens there, I'm assuming that game will be on Friday. And so what jumps out here? Well, first of all, you got 4 games, no true road games, and there's those first 4 games, all the non-conference games right out of the gate. So it's kind of a nice build-up to SEC play. And then you look at the SEC schedule. It's home and away. It alternates every week. You do have Florida and Tennessee back-to-back at home, but no back-to-back road games. So that's a good news for Missouri there. If you look at the other SEC schedule, it seems like almost everybody has at least one back-to-back road games in the SEC, but not Missouri. They start with a road game, they end with a road game, but no back-to-back road games. So that's good news for them. But that schedule, I mean, after Vanderbilt, I mean, there's no break. There is no break. Every game going to be tough. LSU, Kentucky, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, Arkansas. That is a gauntlet right there, and that is going to be a very tough schedule. Again, the first 5 games, manageable. Kansas State will be tough, but it wouldn't shock me if Missouri started off 5-0 or at least 4-1. But then after that, will they even get another win? I mean, they could win a couple of these games, but it will be tough going from LSU to Arkansas. A very tough final 7 games for Missouri in 2023. The projection for Missouri in 2022 was 6-6, and that's what their regular season record was. So they were right there at the projection. Again, here is the schedule, and this is the scale that we'll use to do this projection. If the game is in the white, that's a 50-50 game. Games where I think the spread will be less than a touchdown, less than 20 over 80. Games where I think the spread will be 20 or more, 20-29, 71-80. Those are games where I think the spread will be 10 to 19 points, double-digit spreads. And then 30-39, 61-70. Those are games where I think the spread will be around a touchdown, 6, 7, 8, maybe 9 points, kind of in that range. So for Missouri, we're going to start with the easy wins. And I think you've got a couple of them, South Dakota and Middle Tennessee. South Dakota is probably closer to 99%. Middle Tennessee is closer to 80%. This is a Middle Tennessee team that went on the road and beat Miami last year. So not a cupcake game, not a guaranteed win, but still a game that Missouri has no business losing. As long as they show up and play their game, they should not have any problems here, and they'll probably be favored by, about 21 points. It could possibly be a game that winds up in the blue, but even if it did, it really doesn't change the projection because the blue and the green games are all counted as wins. So how about games where they'll be a slight favorite? I think against Memphis, they'll be favored by 7 or 8 points. Memphis, a pretty good Group of 5 team out of the American Conference, so that's not going to be an easy win for Missouri, but it's a game where I think they will be the clear favorites. And so these are really the only 3 games where I think Missouri is clearly the favorite. There'll be some other games where maybe they're favored, but it'll be by not a whole lot. So we'll go to those games now where they'll be underdogs. LSU and Georgia, I think they will be double-digit underdogs in both of these games. LSU figures to be potentially a top 5 team this year. Georgia, we know what they're going to be, plus that game is on the road. That one will probably be an 18-point spread. LSU maybe 13 or 14 points. But again, Missouri clearly underdogs and pretty big underdogs in both of those games. Some other games where I think they'll be underdogs, but not huge underdogs. We're talking Kansas State, Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee. I think they'll be about a touchdown underdog in these 4 games. I know Kansas State beat them easily last year, but this time it's at Missouri. Kansas State loses some key guys from last year, so I think that should be a competitive game. I do think Missouri will be an underdog in that game, but not a huge underdog. Kentucky, because it's on the road, I think they'll be an underdog by 6 or 7 there. South Carolina, Tennessee, both teams that should be better than Missouri, but home field advantage keeps those pretty close for Missouri. If those games are on the road, then they perhaps would be in the orange, but playing at home, again, that gives Missouri a chance. I don't think they'll be a huge underdog against South Carolina and Tennessee, but I do think they will clearly be the underdogs in those games. And again, Memphis, Kansas State, same thing. That leaves Vanderbilt, Florida, and Arkansas. These are all the 50-50 games in my opinion. We'll start with Vanderbilt. This is a team that did improve last year. I would have had this game in the purple if it was at home, but playing on the road, that kind of knocked this one down to a 50-50 game. I do think Missouri will be favored by 4 or 5 points in this one. So I do think they'll be favored, but it's a low enough number that I think we can put this one in this category, call it a 50-50 game. Florida, that's a tough one. I don't know who will be favored in that one. That's pretty much a pick 'em. I could see it going either way with home field advantage going to Missouri. Perhaps they're favored by a field goal. And I think Missouri probably about a field goal underdog against Arkansas. That game on the road and that series, that rivalry, if you want to call it a rivalry, it seems like we can never predict what's going to happen. The underdog wins many, many times. Last year, Arkansas seemed like they were probably the better team. Missouri went in there and won that one. So, who knows what's going to happen in that one. And so that one definitely, I think, fits the 50-50 category. So 3 games that really could go either way. If they lose all the games in the orange and in the yellow, you've got to win all these 50-50 games to get to a bowl game. So that's going to be tough. I think they have a chance to win at least one of these games in the yellow with Kansas State, Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee. Maybe they pull off one of those wins. And then maybe 2-1 in the 50-50 games. That could still get you to a bowl game. So there are a couple of different ways you could get there. But when we do the projection, Memphis counted at 65%, games in yellow at 35%, games in white at 50%. And it does go back to that, what I just talked about, 6-6. That is the projection for Missouri. So the odds would tell us that, Kansas State, Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee, out of those 3 games, yes, they're an underdog. But when you have that many games, those 4 games, I should say, Odds would say that, yeah, they're probably going to win one of those games. They find a way to win one of those. And then with Vandy, Florida, Arkansas, maybe they find a way to go 2-1 in those. So, yeah, there are a couple of different ways they could get there. But 6-6 does seem to be the projection for Missouri. Right there, getting to the same spot as last year, getting to a bowl game and having a decent year. Not really, looking at a team that's going to be much, much better than last year, but a team that shouldn't be any worse. So I think Missouri, again, this is a pretty fair projection for them to once again go 6-6 in 2023.